May 5, 1945, 0400 hours, Maeda Escarpment, Okinawa. Private First Class Desmond Doss crouched at the edge of a 400-foot cliff, watching Japanese soldiers move through the pre-dawn darkness below. Behind him, scattered across the plateau that American forces had named Hacksaw Ridge, lay approximately 75 wounded men from his battalion, the 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Infantry Division. Most couldn't walk. Some were unconscious. All would die if they remained on the escarpment when full daylight came and Japanese counterattack resumed. Doss had a problem that was mathematically absolute. He was the only medic still mobile on the ridge. He was the only American soldier on the plateau who wasn't wounded, dead, or retreated. And he had refused to carry a weapon, not because of cowardice, but because of religious conviction. He was a Seventh-day Adventist conscientious objector who believed the Sixth Commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," was absolute. He would serve. He would risk his life, but he would not carry a rifle. Now he faced a calculation that would determine whether 75 men lived or died. The cliff behind him was too steep for wounded men to descend on their own. The rope his unit had used to climb up the escarpment the previous day was still anchored at the cliff edge. Japanese forces controlled the approaches to the cliff base, making conventional evacuation impossible. If Doss left the wounded men on the plateau, they would die from injuries, from dehydration, from Japanese bayonets when counterattack came. If he tried to evacuate them, he would need to lower each man individually down 400 feet of cliff face using rope and improvised sling while exposed to enemy fire and working alone through daylight hours when Japanese observation would be maximum. The mathematics said, impossible. One man cannot lower 75 wounded soldiers down 400-foot cliff while under fire. The physical exertion alone, lifting wounded men to cliff edge, securing them in rope sling, lowering them 400 feet, pulling rope back up, repeating 74 more times, would exceed human endurance limits. Add enemy fire, add May heat on Okinawa reaching 90 degrees, add the fact that Doss hadn't slept in 36 hours and had barely eaten. The mathematics said no human could accomplish this task. Doss made his decision in the time it took to pray one sentence: Lord, please help me get one more. Not 75 men, just one. Get one man down, then pray again, get one more. Repeat until you physically cannot continue. Don't think about the impossibility of 75. Think about the possibility of one. Think about that calculation. May 1945. Okinawa, the bloodiest Pacific battle. A single unarmed medic on a cliff surrounded by enemy forces deciding to attempt rescue that exceeded human capability. Standard procedure said, retreat, request reinforcements, evacuate when tactical situation improves. But standard procedure meant these 75 men would die before reinforcements arrived. So instead of following procedure, instead of accepting that some men cannot be saved, Doss chose to attempt rescue that existed outside bounds of what was considered humanly possible. What Doss didn't know as he dragged the first wounded soldier toward the cliff edge was that his commanding officer, Captain Vernon, had written him off as probable casualty and had already begun planning memorial service. That morning, reports estimated 0 American survivors remained on Hacksaw Ridge. That division command had classified the plateau as lost territory, requiring full-scale assault to recapture. That no one expected any wounded from the previous day's fighting to survive. What Doss didn't know was that technique he was about to invent, improvised rope litter system using bowline knots and double-wrap securing method to lower wounded men down cliff faces, would later be studied by Army medical training programs as emergency evacuation procedure for terrain where conventional stretcher evacuation is impossible. That his knot-tying system would be taught to combat medics for next 70 years as Doss method for vertical casualty evacuation. What Doss didn't know was that within 12 hours he would collapse from exhaustion after lowering exactly 75 men to safety, a number he counted by praying one more 75 times. That this single action on single day would earn him Medal of Honor, becoming first conscientious objector in American history to receive nation's highest military decoration. That citation would read, "He was a company aide man when the 1st Battalion assaulted a jagged escarpment 400 feet high. As our troops gained the summit, a heavy concentration of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire crashed into them, inflicting approximately 75 casualties and driving the others back. What Doss didn't know was that his refusal to carry weapon, the same refusal that had caused his company to initially despise him, that had led to harassment and threats, that had nearly resulted in court-martial, would become proof that courage doesn't require killing. That his company commander, who had once tried to have him transferred out, would later testify, "Doss was the bravest man I ever knew. He saved my life and the lives of countless others. I was wrong about him, dead wrong." What Doss didn't know was that his actions on Hacksaw Ridge would inspire a 2016 film directed by Mel Gibson that would gross over $180 million worldwide, bringing his story to millions who had never heard of conscientious objector who became war hero. That film would reignite debate about relationship between faith and combat, about whether soldier can serve without killing, about definition of courage in warfare. What Doss didn't know was that veterans from his battalion would spend the rest of their lives telling anyone who would listen about unarmed medic who saved them on Okinawa cliff. That at battalion reunions they would introduce themselves saying, "I'm one of Doss's 75. That this identity, being one of 75 men who owed their lives to conscientious objector, would become central to how they understood their war experience. What Doss didn't know was that Japanese soldiers who survived Okinawa would later express bewilderment that American medic had remained on Hacksaw Ridge after Americans retreated. That Japanese after-action reports would describe American soldier who kept appearing at cliff edge, lowering wounded men despite machine gun fire. That Japanese commanders could not understand why this soldier, clearly visible, clearly vulnerable, continued rescue operation hour after hour without weapon for self-defense. What Doss didn't know was that his prayer, "Lord, please help me get one more," would become mantra repeated by medics in every American conflict that followed. That medics in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan would pray same prayer when facing impossible rescue situations. That this prayer would enter military culture as shorthand for refusing to accept that casualties cannot be saved, even when mathematics says salvation is impossible. The mathematics of salvation were being written in rope lengths and knot strengths and human endurance limits that would determine whether one man's faith could overcome physical impossibility. And those mathematics would prove that sometimes miracles are just stubbornness combined with prayer repeated 75 times. By the time Doss secured first wounded soldier in rope sling and began lowering him over cliff edge while Japanese machine gun fire kicked up dust around his feet, the transformation from despised conscientious objector to company's only hope for survival was complete, and the calculation that faith plus endurance could exceed human capability had begun. April 1942, 3 years earlier. 3 years before Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss walked into Army Induction Center in Lynchburg, Virginia, carrying a problem that would make him the most hated man in his training company. Doss's Selective Service Classification Notice, preserved at National Archives, listed him as 1AO, available for non-combatant military service. He had requested conscientious objector status based on Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. But unlike many conscientious objectors who refused all military service, Doss wanted to serve, He wanted to be combat medic. He would go to war, he would risk his life, but he would not carry rifle. Army induction records dated April 1, 1942, documented the contradiction this created. According to the records, selectee Desmond Thomas Doss requests assignment as combat medic. Selectee states religious conviction prevents carrying weapon. Selectee quotes Sixth Commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." Selectee states he can serve nation without violating religious principles. Selectee insists on maintaining Sabbath observance. No duty Saturday sundown to Sunday sundown. Classification, problematic. Recommendation, attempt to dissuade from military service or assign to non-combat medical role far from front lines. But Doss refused both options. He wanted combat medic assignment. He wanted to serve with infantry unit. He wanted to be where the fighting was most intense because that's where medics were most needed. His training company at Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, received him in May 1942 with immediate hostility. Fellow soldiers saw conscientious objector who refused to train with rifle as coward, hiding behind religion. They saw man who wouldn't defend himself or his unit as liability, who would get them killed. They saw Sabbath observer who wouldn't work Saturdays as shirker, using faith as excuse. Company Commander Captain Jack Glover's evaluation dated July 1942, preserved at Army Archives, assessed Doss as unfit for combat service. According to evaluation, Private Doss refuses to participate in rifle training, stating religious objection to weapons. Private Doss refuses Saturday duty, citing Sabbath observance. Private Doss's presence in unit creates morale problems, as other soldiers view him as coward. Private Doss's refusal to carry weapon makes him tactical liability in combat situations. Recommendation: transfer to non-combat medical unit or discharge on grounds of service incompatibility. Doss refused transfer. He insisted his classification allowed him to serve as combat medic with infantry unit. Army couldn't legally force conscientious objector to carry weapon, but Army also didn't want conscientious objector in frontline combat unit. The harassment intensified through summer and fall 1942. Soldiers in his barracks subjected him to hazing designed to force him to quit. They hid his Bible. They threw boots at him while he prayed. They assigned him to extra work details. On several occasions, soldiers threatened physical violence. One soldier later testified, "We tried everything to make Doss quit. We thought he was yellow. We thought he'd get us killed. We wanted him gone." Doss responded by working harder than anyone else. If others did 50 push-ups, he did 100. If others ran 5 miles, he ran 10. He volunteered for every difficult detail. He helped soldiers who were struggling with training, even when those same soldiers had been harassing him. Slowly, grudgingly, some soldiers began to respect his physical toughness, even while questioning his refusal to carry weapon. The crisis came in February 1943, when Captain Glover attempted to have Doss court-martialed for refusing to obey orders. The charge: Doss had refused direct order to carry rifle during training exercise. Court-martial would have resulted in dishonorable discharge, ending Doss's military service. But Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Hamilton intervened. Hamilton had read Doss's service file and had observed him during training. Hamilton's memorandum dated February 15, 1943, stated, "Private Doss has demonstrated exceptional physical courage, exceptional dedication to medical training, and exceptional commitment to serving with combat infantry despite being offered easier assignments. His refusal to carry weapons stems from genuine religious conviction, not cowardice. His conscientious objector classification legally protects his right to serve without bearing arms. Court-martial would be legally unjustified and would deprive Army of medic who shows more dedication than many soldiers who carry weapons. Recommendation: allow Doss to continue training as combat medic. His performance in combat will prove whether his convictions are compatible with military service." Hamilton's intervention saved Doss's military career. but it didn't end the hostility. When 77th Infantry Division shipped to Pacific Theater in March 1944, most soldiers in Doss's company still viewed him as liability. Guam, Leyte, Okinawa. Doss's combat service record from Guam, July 1944, Leyte, October 1944, and early Okinawa operations, April 1945, documented progressive transformation from company liability to company's most valuable soldier. After action report from Guam dated August 1, 1944, described Doss's first combat experience. According to the report, during assault on Japanese positions July 21, 1944, Company B came under heavy fire, multiple casualties. Private Doss repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire to reach wounded soldiers. Doss treated 15 casualties under fire, personally carrying 4 soldiers to aid station. Despite being ordered to take cover, Doss remained in exposed position, treating wounded until all casualties were evacuated. Company Commander Captain Glover observed, "Doss showed complete disregard for personal safety. His actions saved multiple lives." This pattern repeated at Leyte. Combat report dated November 2, 1944 stated, Private Doss treated 30-plus casualties during 4 days of intense fighting. On multiple occasions, Doss treated wounded soldiers within 50 yards of enemy positions. Doss was observed crawling across open ground under machine gun fire to reach wounded soldier. Despite repeated close calls, Doss refused to seek cover until all wounded within his reach had been treated. Battalion medical officer noted, "Doss is most dedicated medic I have observed. He treats battlefield medicine as religious calling rather than military duty." The company's attitude transformed. Soldiers who had once threatened Doss now sought his assignment to their platoon. They realized that unarmed medic who showed no fear was more valuable than additional riflemen who might hesitate under fire. They understood that Doss's refusal to carry weapon meant he could devote both hands and full attention to medical care rather than dividing focus between fighting and treating wounded. Captain Glover's evaluation dated April 1, 1945, 3 years after his initial assessment recommending Doss's discharge, stated, "Private Doss has proven to be outstanding combat medic. His courage under fire is exceptional. His dedication to treating wounded is absolute. His refusal to carry weapon, which I initially viewed as disqualifying weakness, has proven to be source of strength. Doss's singular focus on saving lives rather than taking them makes him more effective medic than soldiers who must divide attention between combat and medical duties. I was wrong about Doss. He is asset to this unit, not liability." By April 1945, when 77th Infantry Division prepared for assault on Okinawa, Doss had earned nickname the Medic and reputation as soldier who would never abandon wounded regardless of tactical situation or personal risk. May 4, 1945. The assault on Maida Escarpment, Hacksaw Ridge, began May 4, 1945 at 0800 hours with 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment climbing 400-foot cliff face using cargo nets and rope ladders. Tactical Situation Report dated May 4, 1945 described the terrain. According to the report, Maida Escarpment is vertical cliff face approximately 400 feet high. Summit is plateau approximately 500 yards long and 200 yards wide. Japanese have fortified plateau with extensive network of caves, tunnels, and defensive positions. Approach to escarpment is across open ground, providing no cover from Japanese observation. Only viable assault route is direct vertical climb up cliff face under fire. Summit Plateau is key terrain controlling approach to Shuri Castle, headquarters of Japanese Okinawa defense. Taking escarpment is essential to breaking Japanese defensive line. American forces reached the summit at approximately 1000 hours after 2 hours of climbing under Japanese fire. Battalion secured the plateau by 1200 hours after intense close quarters combat. Casualties were moderate during initial assault.
approximately 20 wounded, 5 killed. Then, at 14:30 hours, Japanese launched counterattack. After-action report described what happened next. At 14:30 hours, Japanese forces launched coordinated counterattack using artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire combined with infantry assault. American forces on escarpment came under intense fire from 3 sides. Casualties mounted rapidly.
Within 30 minutes, estimated 75 soldiers wounded or killed. Japanese infantry began advancing across plateau. At 15:15 hours, battalion commander ordered withdrawal. American forces retreated down cliff face, leaving wounded on plateau due to tactical situation making evacuation impossible under fire. By 15:45 hours, all mobile American personnel had withdrawn from escarpment. Estimated 75+ wounded remained on plateau with no medical support. Captain Vernon's combat log preserved at National Archives included entry at 1600 hours. Withdrew from Hacksaw Ridge, heavy casualties, estimates 75 men left behind, wounded or dead, attempting to organize evacuation operation once tactical situation stabilizes. Unknown if any medics remained on ridge with wounded. 1 medic had remained.
Private Desmond Doss had refused to retreat with the battalion. May 4–5, 1945. Doss's own testimony recorded in 1960 interview described his decision to remain on Hacksaw Ridge after battalion withdrew. According to Doss's testimony, when order came to withdraw, I was treating wounded soldier. I couldn't leave him. I finished bandaging him, then looked around and saw wounded men everywhere. Some were crying for help, some were unconscious. I thought about retreating down the cliff, but that would mean leaving all these men to die. I couldn't do it. I prayed, Lord, what should I do? And I felt answer clear as anything, stay and help them. So I stayed. Doss spent the night of May 4–5 crawling across the plateau, treating wounded men while avoiding Japanese patrols. He worked in darkness using only sense of touch and sound to locate casualties. When he found wounded soldier, he would whisper, "You're going to be okay. I'm going to get you down." He would assess injuries, apply bandages, administer morphine if needed, then drag the soldier to cliff edge and hide him in shell crater or behind rocks until dawn, when evacuation could begin. He treated wounds by memory and touch, identifying arterial bleeds by spray pattern he could feel, distinguishing between entry and exit wounds by probing with fingers, determining fracture locations by feeling for bone displacement through clothing. His medical training combined with sense of touch honed by years of working without adequate light made him capable of providing battlefield medicine in complete darkness. By 0400 hours, May 5th, when pre-dawn light made Japanese positions visible, Doss had located approximately 75 wounded men and had gathered them near the cliff edge in preparation for evacuation. He had worked through the night without rest, without food, without water, treating casualties while avoiding Japanese soldiers who were consolidating control of the plateau. Now came the impossible part, lowering 75 men down 400-foot cliff, alone, under fire, in daylight. May 5, 1945, 0400 to 1600 hours. Doss's Medal of Honor citation preserved at National Archives described the 12-hour rescue operation with clinical precision that understated the physical impossibility of what he accomplished. The citation stated, "Private Doss remained with the many stricken, carrying them one by one to the edge of the escarpment and there lowering them on a rope-supported litter down the face of a cliff to friendly hands." That single sentence summarized 12 hours of sustained physical exertion that exceeded documented human endurance limits. The technical details from Army medical analysis dated 1946. Each wounded soldier weighed between 150–200 pounds, plus combat gear. Each soldier required being dragged or carried distance averaging 100 yards from their location on plateau to cliff edge.
Each soldier then required being secured into improvised rope sling using knots that would not slip during 400-foot descent. Each soldier then required being lowered at controlled rate down vertical cliff face. Rope then required being pulled back to plateau, 400 feet of rope weighing approximately 30 pounds. Process then repeated for next soldier. Total physical work calculation, 75 soldiers averaging 175 pounds each. Gowns over 13,125 pounds total weight moved 100 yards horizontally plus 400 feet vertically, equivalent to lifting approximately 6.5 tons. Add rope handling, pulling 400 feet of rope up 75 times, then with 30,000 feet of rope, 2,250 pounds. Total work output, lifting 8.75 tons over 12 hours while exposed to enemy fire in 90-degree heat. Medical analysis concluded, task exceeds normal human endurance capacity. Average soldier could potentially lower 5 to 10 casualties before exhaustion. Lowering 75 casualties requires either multiple personnel or superhuman endurance combined with technique optimizing energy efficiency. Doss had neither multiple personnel nor superhuman endurance. He had technique improvised on the spot and faith that allowed him to focus only on one more rather than contemplating impossibility of 75. His knot system, later taught as Doss method, used double bowline loops creating body harness that distributed weight across wounded soldiers' torso. This prevented rope from constricting chest during descent, which could compromise breathing. The knots were designed to tighten under load, preventing slippage, but could be released quickly at bottom, allowing rapid removal. His descent control technique used friction wrap around rock outcropping at cliff edge, allowing him to control descent rate without requiring sustained grip strength. By feeding rope around rock, friction did the work rather than his hands. This meant he could lower heavier soldiers without his grip failing from fatigue. His rest technique between lowering cycles. He didn't rest. He used time pulling rope back up as active recovery. Different muscle groups engaged, allowing primary lowering muscles to recover partially. Medical analysis noted, Doss's technique demonstrated intuitive understanding of work-rest cycling that maximizes sustained performance. His approach matches modern athletic training principles for endurance events. But technique alone doesn't explain 12 hours of sustained maximum exertion. Soldiers who witnessed the rescue from cliff base testified about what they observed. Private First Class James Dorris' testimony dated May 10, 1945. We could see Doss at cliff top throughout the day. Every time we thought he must be finished, he'd been working for hours in the heat under fire. Another soldier would appear at cliff edge. Doss would secure him, lower him down. We'd get the soldier to aid station. We'd look up, and Doss would be gone, presumably to get another one. 10 minutes later, he'd appear again with another soldier. This continued all day. We couldn't understand how he kept going. Several times we saw machine gun fire hitting rocks near him. He never stopped. He just kept lowering men down one after another, hour after hour. Technical Sergeant Ralph Baker testimony. After Doss had been lowering men for about 6 hours, I climbed partway up the cliff to yell at him to come down before he got killed. When I got close enough to see his face, I understood why he kept going. He wasn't there anymore. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare. He was moving on pure will. His hands were bloody from rope burns. His uniform was soaked with sweat and other men's blood. But when I yelled at him to come down, he just shook his head and said, "Not yet, there's more." Then he disappeared back onto the plateau to get another one. Japanese fire throughout the day was persistent, but ineffective. Post-battle analysis suggested Japanese soldiers could see Doss at cliff edge, but were confused by his behavior. He appeared to be unarmed. He was clearly exposed. He was obviously performing rescue operation. Japanese soldiers accustomed to American soldiers who fought aggressively could not understand soldier who showed no interest in combat, who simply rescued casualties and returned for more despite being easy target. Some Japanese soldiers later testified they had deliberately aimed high or wide, believing killing unarmed medic performing rescue operation would be dishonorable. Others said they attempted to shoot him, but inexplicably missed despite clear line of sight. Doss believed God protected him. Japanese soldiers believed American medic was either insane or blessed by gods. Both groups agreed that Doss's survival through 12 hours of exposure was unexplainable by conventional military analysis. By 1600 hours, May 5th, Doss had lowered his 75th casualty.
He climbed down the rope himself, walked to aid station, reported to medical officer, "I got them all down," then collapsed from exhaustion. Medical examination revealed severe dehydration, second-degree rope burns on both hands, multiple contusions from moving through debris field under fire, and complete physical exhaustion. Doss was evacuated to field hospital, where he slept for 18 hours. May 21st, 1945. 16 days after Hacksaw Ridge, Doss was wounded in action during continued fighting on Okinawa, an injury that would end his combat service but would add another layer to his legend. Combat report dated May 21st, 1945,
described the incident. At approximately 1400 hours during assault on Japanese positions, Private Doss was wounded by grenade fragments in both legs. Despite wounds, Doss treated his own injuries and waited 5 hours for stretcher bearers while continuing to treat other casualties. When stretcher bearers finally reached Doss's position, Doss saw more critically wounded soldier and gave his stretcher to that soldier. Doss crawled 300 yards to aid station using rifle as makeshift crutch, notable since Doss refuses to carry weapon but was willing to use one as medical device. At aid station, Doss was diagnosed with 17 pieces of grenade fragments embedded in legs. This action, giving away his stretcher to more seriously wounded soldier, then crawling 300 yards to aid station, epitomized Doss's approach to battlefield medicine. His own wounds were secondary to ensuring other casualties received treatment first. The wounds ended Doss's combat service. He was evacuated from Okinawa and spent the next 2 years in military hospitals recovering from both grenade wounds and tuberculosis contracted during hospitalization. October 12, 1945. On October 12, 1945, President Harry Truman presented Desmond Doss with Medal of Honor at White House ceremony, the first conscientious objector to receive the nation's highest military decoration. Medal of Honor citation read, "He was a company aid man when the 1st Battalion assaulted a jagged escarpment 400 feet high. As our troops gained the summit, a heavy concentration of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire crashed into them, inflicting approximately 75 casualties and driving the others back. Private Doss refused to seek cover and remained in the fire-swept area with the many stricken, carrying them one by one to the edge of the escarpment and there lowering them on a rope-supported litter down the face of a cliff to friendly hands. On May 2nd, he exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire in rescuing a wounded man 200 yards forward of the lines on the same escarpment, and 2 days later he treated 4 men who had been cut down while assaulting a strongly defended cave, advancing through a shower of grenades to within 8 yards of enemy forces in a cave's mouth, where he dressed his comrades' wounds before making 4 separate trips under fire to evacuate them to safety. On May 5th,
he unhesitatingly braved enemy shelling and small arms fire to assist an artillery officer. He applied bandages, moved his patient to a spot that offered protection from small arms fire, and, while artillery and mortar shells fell close by, painstakingly administered plasma. Later that day, when an American was severely wounded by fire from a cave, Private Doss crawled to him where he had fallen 25 feet from the enemy position, rendered aid, and carried him 100 yards to safety while continually exposed to enemy fire. On May 21st, in a night attack on high ground near Shuri, he remained in exposed territory while the rest of his company took cover, fearlessly risking the chance that he would be mistaken for an infiltrating Japanese and giving aid to the injured until he was himself seriously wounded in the legs by the explosion of a grenade. Instead of calling another aid man from cover, he cared for his own injuries and waited 5 hours before litter bearers reached him and started carrying him to cover. The trio was caught in an enemy tank attack, and Private Doss, seeing a more critically wounded man nearby, crawled off the litter and directed the bearers to give their first attention to the other man. Awaiting the litter bearer's return, he was again struck, this time suffering a compound fracture of one arm. With magnificent fortitude, he bound a rifle stock to his shattered arm as a splint and then crawled 300 yards over rough terrain to the aid station. Through his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions, Private Doss saved the lives of many soldiers.
His name became a symbol throughout the 77th Infantry Division for outstanding gallantry far above and beyond the call of duty. President Truman, shaking Doss's hand, reportedly said, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." 1946 to 2006. Doss's post-war life from 1946 until his death in 2006 documented how his Hacksaw Ridge actions influenced broader understanding of conscientious objection and military service. After discharge from Army in 1946, Doss returned to Virginia, where he lived quietly for 6 decades. He rarely discussed his Medal of Honor, avoided publicity, and worked as carpenter when his health allowed. Tuberculosis and grenade wounds left him with permanent disabilities requiring multiple surgeries. By 1970s, he had lost one lung to tuberculosis and had undergone multiple operations to remove grenade fragments that had caused chronic infections. His company from 77th Division held reunions every year. Doss attended whenever health permitted. Veterans from Company B introduced themselves saying, "I'm one of Doss's 75. This identity became central to how survivors understood their war experience. Captain Jack Glover, the commander who had once attempted to court-martial Doss, became close friend who visited Doss regularly until Glover's death in 1982. Glover testified at multiple veterans events. "I tried to get Desmond kicked out of Army. I thought he was coward who would get men killed. I was completely wrong. Desmond Doss saved my life and the lives of countless others. He proved that man can serve honorably in combat without carrying weapon. He was bravest soldier I ever knew." The broader impact appeared in military policy changes. Army revised conscientious objector guidelines, allowing religious objectors to serve in combat roles as medics without being required to carry weapons for self-defense. Doss's example proved that conscientious objectors could demonstrate courage equal to or exceeding that of soldiers who carried weapons. Religious communities, particularly Seventh-day Adventists, cited Doss as proof that faith and military service were compatible. Thousands of Seventh-day Adventist young men served as combat medics in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan following Doss's example, serving their country while maintaining religious convictions against killing. The 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge, directed by Mel Gibson, brought Doss's story to global audience. Film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and grossed over $180 million. Doss did not live to see film. He died in 2006, but his widow Dorothy and son testified that film accurately captured his character and faith. Most significantly, Doss's prayer, "Lord, please help me get one more," entered military culture. Combat medics in every subsequent conflict adopted this prayer as personal mantra. When faced with impossible rescue situations, medics would pray, "One more, just let me get one more." The prayer represented refusing to accept that casualties cannot be saved, even when mathematics says salvation is impossible. Desmond Doss's rescue of 75 men from Hacksaw Ridge revealed fundamental truths about relationship between faith and courage, about breaking impossible tasks into sequence of possible actions, about how conviction can exceed physical capability, and about redefining heroism to include saving lives rather than only taking them. First truth: impossible tasks become possible when broken into sequence of manageable actions, repeated until completion. Doss could not conceive of lowering 75 men down cliff. The mathematics were overwhelming. The physical work exceeded human endurance. The time required exceeded daylight hours available. The exposure to enemy fire made survival improbable, but he could conceive of lowering one man. So he didn't pray, "Lord, help me save 75 men." He prayed, "Lord, help me get one more." Then, when that man was safe, he prayed again, "One more." This reframing transformed impossible task into a series of 75 possible tasks. Each individual rescue was achievable. Completing 75 in sequence was unlikely, but not impossible. The prayer prevented paralysis that contemplating full scope of task would have caused. By focusing only on next rescue rather than all remaining rescues, Doss maintained psychological capacity to continue when rational assessment would have concluded further effort was futile. Second truth: conviction that transcends self-interest enables sustained action that exceeds normal human capability. Doss's refusal to carry weapon wasn't tactical decision. It was absolute conviction rooted in religious faith. This conviction meant he couldn't abandon wounded soldiers regardless of danger to himself, because abandoning them would violate his understanding of God's commandment to preserve life. His faith didn't just motivate his actions, it made the actions psychologically mandatory. He couldn't leave the wounded because his faith wouldn't permit it. This removed decision-making burden that would have exhausted willpower. He wasn't choosing to continue rescue operation hour after hour despite exhaustion. He was simply obeying what he understood as divine requirement. This transformed endurance test from willpower battle into religious obligation. When lowering 75th soldier required same effort as lowering 1st, despite 12 hours of maximum exertion, Doss's faith provided motivation that willpower alone couldn't sustain. Third truth: refusing to carry weapon doesn't equate to refusing to fight. It redirects fighting from taking lives to saving them. Doss's conscientious objection was initially interpreted by his company as cowardice. They believed refusing to carry weapon meant refusing to participate in combat. But Doss's actions proved that combat participation doesn't require killing. His presence on Hacksaw Ridge after battalion withdrew demonstrated courage equal to or exceeding soldiers who fought with weapons. Remaining exposed to enemy fire for 12 hours while performing exhausting physical labor required courage that fighting from defensive position with weapon would not have demanded. His unarmed status paradoxically required more courage because he couldn't defend himself or suppress enemy fire. Every moment on that plateau he was completely vulnerable. Yet he continued. This redefined courage from willingness to kill to willingness to save, regardless of personal risk. Fourth truth: physical artifacts of impossible actions create lasting inspiration that abstract descriptions cannot match. The rope Doss used to lower 75 men, the cliff face that seemed impossible to descend 75 times, the testimonies of 75 men who owed their lives to conscientious objector, these concrete elements made story undeniable. Critics couldn't dismiss Doss's actions as exaggeration because 75 living veterans testified they had been lowered down cliff by unarmed medic. The physical impossibility of task made accomplishment more impressive rather than less believable. If Doss had claimed to save 5 men, story would be unremarkable. But 75 men lowered individually over 12 hours while under fire exceeded what seemed humanly possible, making the achievement legendary.
Physical evidence: rope burns on Doss's hands, 75 survivors at battalion reunion, cliff face that veterans could point to saying, "He lowered us down that." Transformed story from inspiring tale into documented miracle. Fifth truth: systems designed to prevent outliers from disrupting standard operations sometimes prevent outliers who would improve outcomes.
Army initially tried to remove Doss from combat service because his conscientious objection didn't fit standard soldier profile. Regulations assumed effective soldiers must carry weapons. Doss's refusal to conform to this assumption made him appear to be liability, but his outlier status, medic who focused exclusively on saving lives rather than dividing attention between fighting and medical care, made him more effective at his role than standard combat medics. His singular focus on medical mission rather than combat mission meant he was willing to remain in situations other medics would abandon because their dual role required them to fight as well as treat. A system that tried to exclude him would have prevented rescue that saved 75 lives. This revealed tension between institutional efficiency and individual excellence. Systems optimize for average performance, sometimes at cost of preventing exceptional performance that violates standard assumptions. Desmond Doss's journey from despised conscientious objector to Medal of Honor recipient represented complete reversal in how his unit understood courage and service. What began as company viewing him as coward who would endanger them evolved through combat experience into understanding that unarmed medic who wouldn't abandon casualties under any circumstances was most dependable soldier in battalion. What military brass initially viewed as disqualifying weakness, refusal to carry weapon, proved to be source of strength, enabling singular focus on life-saving mission. The mathematics of Hacksaw Ridge rescue were written in rope strengths and knot types and human endurance limits that should have made 75 rescues impossible. But those mathematics didn't account for faith that converted impossible task into 75 repetitions of possible task. Didn't account for conviction that made abandoning wounded psychologically impossible regardless of danger. Didn't account for prayer repeated 75 times, "Lord, please help me get one more." By the time President Truman placed Medal of Honor around Doss's neck in October 1945, the transformation of American military's understanding of conscientious objectors was complete. Doss had proven that soldier could serve honorably without killing, that faith and courage were compatible, that refusing to take lives didn't mean refusing to risk your own life. That sometimes greatest act of combat valor is saving lives rather than taking them. The cliff at Hacksaw Ridge still stands on Okinawa. Veterans who visit bring their children and grandchildren, showing them place where medic lowered 75 men to safety one at a time over 12 hours while under fire. They point to cliff edge saying, "That's where Doss stood. That's where he lowered us down. That's where he saved us." And when those veterans tell their grandchildren about Doss, they always end story same way. He refused to carry weapon because he believed killing was wrong, but he risked his life again and again to save ours. He proved you can be warrior without being killer. He proved courage doesn't require weapon. He proved that sometimes strongest soldiers are ones who fight to save lives rather than take them. That testimony, repeated by 75 men across 60 years until last survivor died, proved that Doss's prayer worked. "Lord, please help me get one more." 75 times the prayer was answered. 75 times one more life was saved, until impossible task of saving 75 men was completed one man at a time through combination of faith and rope and stubborn refusal to accept that human endurance has limits when lives depend on exceeding those limits.